are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You're listening to Locked On Big Ten, everything you need to know about the conference every single weekday. As we wrap things up here on a Friday, we're going to be talking first round of the NFL draft stuff later on here with Ryan Herrings. But right now, we're going to have a little conversation on current Big Ten football, not the past of it. Matt Sheehan's here with Locked On Spartans, of course, hosting with us on Locked On Big Ten once a week. And joining us on the show, John Garcia Jr., Director of Football Recruiting over at Sports Illustrated, and also working with us now here at Locked On to try and make us all a little bit smarter about what's going on the football field. We can never have too many people for that because it's just a really, really confusing game sometimes. John, thanks for joining us here for a couple of minutes on Locked On Big Ten. But before we get into specifics, let's start out from a helicopter view. What are you seeing as far as transfers go in and out of the Big Ten as we take a look at the transfer portal and all the holes that a lot of Big Ten teams need to fill right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Big Ten is reflective of most of the other Power Five conferences. There's a lot of incoming and outgoing all at the same time as every coach tries to fulfill the roster. And really, some are trying to cut down while others are trying to build out. And I think that's what makes roster management as hard now as it's ever been in college football. You're dealing with the 85-man limit, the signing limits on top of that while trying to fill out classes and navigate a springtime where more kids are entering the portal and more kids are exiting your program. So it is quite the 12-month deal, but we're coming to a heed with the May 1st deadline approaching in terms of immediate eligibility. So I do think that it's going to settle in the next couple of days, at least to some degree. But I do think the Big Ten has been as active as other programs or other conferences, I should say, with incoming versus outgoing, but not as crazy in one direction as maybe some programs that are going through coaching transitions and things like that. The Big Ten, relative to those conferences, looks very much stable in that regard.
What's got you just stroking your beard the most? Just like, interesting, huh? Like, is it the multiple quarterbacks going to Nebraska in the transfer portal? Like you brought up before we started recording that, like, that's very interesting. Is it an inter-conference transfer going on, or is it something else? What's got your goat here?
Yeah, the inter-conference stuff is always intriguing, no matter the conference, right? Especially if there's any history between the two teams, that is always fun to look into. So certainly, Jalen Berger, I thought was interesting. Damian Robinson, more recently, going from Maryland to Penn State. I mean, arguably the top pass rusher recruit signed by the Big Ten a couple of cycles ago. But yeah, multiple quarterbacks going to one school via the transfer route is not something that we really ever see. It certainly creates immediate competition, especially with the relative experience that both Casey Thompson and Chubba Purdy had when they made the move to Nebraska, but certainly not something we will see on a consistent basis in any way, shape, or form. So always something fascinating. But I thought teams utilize the portal really well, including some overhauls. I really like how some teams approached it almost positionally, like, hey, let's swipe in a whole new position group, or at least competition at the position group relative to Indiana's defensive line, Nebraska's quarterback room that we just talked about, Rutgers 4 O-line transfers, including Curtis Dunlap. So yeah, there's certainly different strategies that we're starting to see play out in the portal, no doubt.
And that's a result of just the changes we've seen in the portal too, right? I mean, just a huge amount of more players going in. The idea of you being able to, like you said, just kind of overhaul a whole position group over the course of one offseason in the portal, that's not something people even had on the radar 3-4 years ago or something like that. Is there an example of a Big Ten team doing that here this offseason?
Yeah, I think the trenches in general, because you're getting size and experience, right? So kids come into college at 18, and then they naturally just hit another level physically. So naturally, when you get to the big guys, O-line and D-line, you do see a lot more movement because it's such a big need. I thought Minnesota was another one that had an entire O-line overhaul. Quinn Carroll comes over from Notre Dame, Darnell Jeffries from Clemson in the trenches there as well. Chuck Falagia from Michigan. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. So it's really interesting to see how they navigate that entire process. But we're so used to focusing on, you lose one quarterback, you bring one in. Like, Michael Penix is out at Indiana, so Connor Blazelax comes in. Really kind of tit for tat, really simple addition and subtraction. But yeah, in a lot of cases, you can really trend up based on how you navigate the portal. And it's just, again, it's fascinating to watch. And we're seeing more of this. We're seeing more position groups sort of moving together and being built together to give these coaches a little bit more oomph in the offseason.
No, this has been great talking about which Big Ten programs have really increased their roster skill. I'm here to end that right now. Which Big Ten team has kind of lost the most or had the biggest loss in the transfer portal, whether it is an individual guy like Michael Penix, for example, or if there's a position group that was hit, or is there a Big Ten team that you're seeing a lot of outgoing transfers and you're like, ugh, yikes, that sucks for them?
Yeah, I mean, not as dramatic in the Big Ten as other schools that have lost. Like I've seen in the ACC, like 7 programs lost 14 or more players, like crazy numbers. I don't know if the Big Ten is that dramatic, but I do think Maryland lost a bunch of players in the transfer portal that have ended up interconference and elsewhere. Certainly Robinson, I think talent wise. Sure. Is maybe the most important one. They did get a great addition, I think, in Jacob Copeland from Florida. I think the wide receiver is really explosive, a ton of experience down in SEC country. But I think Maryland had more outgoing than incoming, at least relative to what I saw on my radar. So that's certainly a cause for concern. But again, the portal's about to be, flooded one more time for the next couple of days. So any team has the opportunity to rebound here in the immediate future.
Can you go over that for a second with us, John? You mentioned a May 1st deadline, next couple of days, things happening. I mean, this is still really new to us, nonetheless. All the other, of course, people trying to follow what's going on with their college teams. So what exactly are all these deadlines and things that are happening over the next few days?
Well, yeah, I mean, the NCAA is trying to figure out the portal just like we are, right? We're all trying to figure out how it is to be navigated. And to my understanding, May 1st is the last entrance deadline for a prospect that's going to play this fall. So if you want to play on the field this year, you got to make your move in the next couple days. I believe you only have to be.
Is that going into the portal or making a decision?
I believe it's going into the portal. I could be wrong on that. I do need to double check there.
That makes more sense.
But I've been told May 1st is the day you need to be not on your current roster, basically, to potentially play at another program. Of course, if you transfer down a division, different things like that, I'm sure you can take a little bit more time. But in terms of getting in the portal, we're here at the 11th hour, and we expect a lot of movement of prospects realizing that and saying, hey, let me jump in while I still can.
We've been telling you for a while, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. If you need some protein to get you through your workout or just through your day, Built Bar is the place to go for a protein bar that gives you all the nutrition you want, but also tastes as good as a candy bar. This stuff is legit, the real stuff as far as taste goes. As far as getting everything you need, it has all that too. We're talking less than 150 calories in every single Built Bar, while getting 4 grams of net carbs and sugar in most bars, and 100% real chocolate in every bar too. It's coated all around the outside, so when you open it up, you're going to say, this looks like a candy bar. It's tasting like a candy bar. But when you look at the packaging, it's a protein bar. It's everything that you need to, again, get through your day or get through a workout or really just anything else. And if you want to try out Built Bar or any of the other Built energy products, whether it be the Built Boosts, Built Puffs, little marshmallows you can pop right in your mouth, get that little boost, anything like that, head on over to built.com right now and use our promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Again, try it over at built.com. All sorts of new flavors coming out with bars all the time over at the site. Head on over to built.com and use the code LOCKED15 for 15% off your order.
This is kind of a broader question to even go higher up in the helicopter here, but over not just even this season, but maybe like the last 2 or 3 seasons when this transfer portal is really blown up, is there any Big Ten program that's really impressed you the most about how they've been utilizing the program, or I'm sorry, the portal? And if that sounds like a question where I'm just saying, hey, can you please talk nice about Mel Tucker for a little bit?
Well,
I was going to say.
Yeah,
I was going to say.
You got me. Like you caught me. You caught me. But is there another coach or another program that's also doing that as well? If you don't just want to talk about Mel Tucker, of course.
No, let's talk about Mel Tucker. Like I think.
There we go.
Look, I cover recruiting on a national scale, and I don't think there's a school doing better with prospects in new regions than Michigan State is under Mel Tucker. They're going into Texas. They're coming down to Georgia and Florida at a lot more consistent of a clip, which is something that he understands, having come from SEC country with Saban and Kirby Smart. Wow, I mean, what a background Mel has. But look, the portal was great to Michigan State, and I like the guys they've added this year. I mean, Chris Bogle has quick twitch off the edge. Amir Speed is a massive DB. That's probably the position. I know everyone focuses on running back, I'm sure now, but really DB is the position where I've seen Michigan State really overhaul quickly and get new experienced players and get them up to speed in a hurry. And I think Amir Speed can be kind of the next guy in that line. But yeah, Mel Tucker's embraced it from the beginning. I think a lot of the first, second year coaches have had to go into the portal, and you've seen two different approaches. You've seen hey, we need bodies approach, and that can, kind of dilute the talent a little bit. And you've seen, programs like Michigan State where they're like, yeah, we need bodies, but let's go get the right guys on top of that who can really kind of shake up the whole roster, put the returners on notice because we're bringing in experienced talent, but also bring in the talent that can actually factor in, should they need to play. So I do think that they've probably done the best job. Penn State has been close. I think in the transfer portal acquisition side of things without losing a lot of big time players, but it's tough. I mean, these numbers are all going to fluctuate again almost daily at this point. So it's really hard to take a ton away from it in April, but obviously as we get closer to the season, we'll have a lot better gauge of things.
Let's talk a little bit more about individuals here, John. I want to get into those Nebraska quarterbacks that you mentioned earlier. Again, two guys out of the transfer portal coming in. Casey Thompson, I believe it was led the Big 12 in touchdowns passing last season. I think it was the stat that I saw, but it seems like, at least in my mind, he's the front runner for this job. But obviously you don't transfer in that situation if you're not trying to play, right? So what's the deal down in Lincoln, and can Scott Frost finally figure it out?
Well, I mean, it wasn't working with one quarterback, so maybe we're on the precipice of a two quarterback system, maybe in Lincoln. I'm not sure in particular there, but I do know that these guys bring different things to the table. I mean, Casey Thompson has been around forever, waited his turn at Texas, and really flashed at times last year, as you mentioned. He's got volume at his back as well, and Texas's defense was so bad that they had to score. They had to score every time out, and I think they averaged like 500 yards a game, and they still had a losing record. It's kind of amazing what went down there. But Casey brings you some athleticism. He brings you some gamer mentality. He's confident in his arm. He'll fit the ball into a tight window, and he's got some toughness after taking a bit of a beating last year. I think that's a new trait that we'll talk about and associate with Thompson's game. And he was thrust into the role there at Texas. So I think that experience was invaluable, as to where Purdy was more of a, you're the guy this week versus this week kind of deal at Florida State. And it was never really solidified as opposed to being thrust into action. So you could certainly understand where his frustrations were under Mike Norvell before making the move up to Lincoln. And I believe Purdy was the second one, right? Who committed first? Was it, I think Thompson committed first and then Purdy came in? Either way, Purdy's had to compete everywhere he's been. That's the point I was trying to build. He's always had to compete to be the guy. And this situation may be, the toughest that he's had to deal with relative to the other guy. So you just wonder what that means for the loser of the battle, as you said, Casey looks like the front runner. Chuba is a little bit more conventional pocket guy, really big arm when he steps into his throws, but known to be a little erratic at times as well. So you don't want to hear that if you're Nebraska. So I think there's a lot to be said in this battle, regardless of who's in front right now. If I'm Scott Frost, I take the entire allotment of the offseason before I make a final call. And that battle could even go into fall camp. I wouldn't be mad at that, because you, of course, risk losing one of these guys if things go sideways. So it's quite the deal to navigate.
Looks like Purdy was about a week later than Purdy was about a week later than Thompson in January. So you're right. You're remembering right.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So,
gotcha.
I mean, walking into that, I think says a lot about the kid as well. Usually it's a musical chair scenario, right? You're here for this school and that's it. Let's move on to the others. But you got to like a kid who bets on himself, at least at the outset.
I'll let you get in a minute here, Matt. I just want to stay with Nebraska. On the other side of the ball, Casey Rogers out on the defensive line. That wasn't expected. How big is that?
It's huge, because I think, Nebraska, from that helicopter view, I like how you put that earlier. From that perspective, you watch Nebraska in 2021 and it's like, man, like they're pretty consistent on defense. Like they really get things done. So you just expected, okay, it's Scott Frost. He's known for offense. You just got to fix the offense and you'll be okay. So you kind of, you go through it thinking why would the defense change? Right? Why would anybody make a move there? Because that was the stronger unit in 2021 and 2020. So to see that movement was certainly surprising, but that's the nature of the portal. There really is no built-in inference as to where a guy may go. I mean, Georgia's best receiver left for the team that they beat in the national championship game like a couple weeks later. I mean, it's a new frontier in college football, and it does remind us, and this is a great example, it does remind us to go back to journalism 101, where we can never assume that anything is what it is.
Yeah, actually, hold on. Let's actually stay on that. Let's talk about you, John. How crazy does this make your job now these days? Like recruiting, listen, you got to keep up with hundreds, if not thousands of names. And now like, oh, great. The transfer portal is even insane too. So like, do you like sleep's done for you, right? Or like, what is it that keeps you going? And
it is weird covering kids that, we have a joke in the recruiting industry, like signing day is such an end point that you're just done with that class. You've already written everything you're ever going to write. You've said everything you're ever going to say. You've evaluated the world. You're just so done with the class. And it's so nice to just turn the page. But now National Unfollow Day was signing day. That's not happening anymore because of the portal. Now we have to continue to, at least at a slower rate, keep up with these prospects and check in, because things do change in such short order. So we're certainly we've all been tested, I think, journalistically to dig back into the reporter roots that most of us have, and the portal's been good for that. But certainly, like we said earlier, man, we're all just trying to figure this thing out at the same time, and it's been fun, but it's certainly been challenging in a lot of ways. Like, oh yeah, I remember this kid from like 4 years ago. Yeah, I remember. Right. I remember what he could do. Now he's 3 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier, but here he is looking for another home again. So it does revert back to kind of the original goal of trying to cover these kids as they try to find their school. But there's a lot different factors at play when you're in the portal, and unfortunately a lot of those kids that are in there will stay there. I think the number was 43% that are in the portal as of January hadn't found a home yet. The NCAA studied that. So it's a big number. And a lot of people I talked to about that 43% number were surprised it wasn't a higher number. They thought it would be closer to 50 or over 50% based on their personal experience. So there's a lot of problems with the portal. There's no doubt about it, but it's certainly been a whole new layer of coverage from a professional standpoint.
BetOnline.net is your place to go for all of your sports betting needs, whether it be actually placing your bets or just the sports info and lines and things that you need to know to make sure that you're making the smart bets. BetOnline has it all. It can be your one-stop shop for anything that you want to do as far as sports gambling goes. And again, they're always renovating with new ways to put your money on your favorite players and teams. And the new website just looks good too. If you've been betting on sports online for a while, you know that that's far from a guarantee. Head on over to BetOnline right now and see what I'm talking about. BetOnline, where the game starts. And as you said, everyone's still trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure it out. Teams are trying to figure it out. The NCAA is trying to figure out. It's a long way from really understanding what this new reality of college football transferring really, really is. John, the quarterback position obviously matters most. And there's some new quarterbacks coming into the Big Ten. I want to know, we've talked a couple about them already. Indiana has a new QB. Obviously, Nebraska has the 2 new QBs. Illinois getting Tommy DeVito from Syracuse to compete for that job there. Do you feel like there's anybody who has the potential, at least, to take their team to a next step next season?
Yeah, that's a good call. I do think the winner of the Nebraska battle has a chance because what we talked about the defense being such a strong unit. I don't think any of those other programs around that quarterback are anything too exciting to dig into. I do think at Indiana with Connor Blazelak, I do think that there is some developmental talent there, that they did bring in some offensive skill guys and more speed to the Hoosier offense. So I do think that maybe that one has a chance. And Blazelak, he's like a gunslinger, man. He's ready to grip and rip it at any point. So I do think that style can win at Indiana. But I don't know if there's a quarterback that you're blown away by, like, man, he came into the Big Ten and he's going to shake the whole league up. I would be surprised if that were to happen, which I think is a reflection of the strength of the Big Ten, because the power programs didn't have to hit the portal to jump into the quarterback race. If anything, they lost quarterbacks because they're so steady at that position.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think I'm done talking about Michigan State, you're out of your mind. But I will make it a conference-wide question here. Kenneth Walker, he was the transfer of the year last year, right? I mean, all-world running back, he was sensational. So as far as skill positions go, like running back or wide receiver, if you just want to go that route, is there anyone that's really catching your eye? Could it be, one of the Spartans like Jalen Berger or Jarek Broussard out of Colorado? Or is there someone else within the conference where you're like, oh, yeah, this guy is going to make some highlights for this team and bring them up a few notches?
I think Berger's going to be a balanced addition to that Sparty running back room. He's got a lot of the same traits that we love about Kenneth Walker. Maybe not the experience and the overall touches, but I think some of that instinctive bounce, right? That the vision is really good there, and he's really strong laterally as well, even dating back to his high school days. So I do think that one makes a lot of sense. I mentioned Jacob Copeland at Maryland. I think he, that team's going to throw the ball. We know this, and they're probably going to be behind a lot. So I think statistically, I think that could be a really strong addition there as well from a skill position standpoint. And then of course, the quarterbacks, man. Who's going to be the guy? I mean, if we don't get excited about one, I'd love to see one of them, shut me up on here and just blow it out of the water. I mean, if I had to pick one, I think it'd be Connor at Indiana. But maybe it's Thompson. That Nebraska foundation on the other side is strong. And they just need a little more juice. And he brings juice to the quarterback position. So those are kind of the ones that caught my attention in kind of skimming some lists earlier today. But again, there could be more on the way. So who knows?
Do you think Mike Loxley uses that as a sales pitch to guys like Copeland? Like, hey, we will be down 4 touchdowns in the third quarter a lot this year. So we are going to sling the hell out of the ball here coming up. And you, good sir, are going to get some targets. Like, you think it's part of the sales pitch on the PowerPoint slide?
Not in as many words. Not in as many words. But I guarantee you Loxley said, hey, look, we're going to throw it a lot. We're going to throw it a lot this year.
Opportunities are there. That's yeah. Love it.
Need to get Matt in some of these negotiation rooms with these recruits. Michigan State.
Absolutely. I can sell you a pile of trash, no problem. Yeah, come on now.
Love it.
I want to zoom out really, really wide one more time before we let you go here, John. Ever since this change happened in the transfer portal, whether it be the COVID change, the eligibility changes, things like that, whenever this exploded, the conversation also erupted about what is this going to do to college sports, college programs. Are Power 5 schools going to get all the benefits? Are lower end schools going to get kind of the trickle down economy of Big Ten and Power 5 players not leading up to the expectations? I'm just interested to hear, just as someone who's had a very close eye on it, what do you feel like has been the kind of trends as to what goes in and what comes out of the Big Ten since everyone, as you said, more than 40%, just about everyone is up for grabs right now?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think there's been a lot of positives. I think we've seen guys that truly need a fresh start, and then you factor in the coaching carousel and just how many circumstantial changes happen anyway in college football. I do think it is unique relative to really all the other sports, and that's why it's always been kind of, for me, viewed on its own plane. Like college football is its own thing. Everywhere else is everywhere else. So I think the stability of the Big Ten has resonated with guys, but you've also seen at the very top, you've seen that crunch, that numbers crunch, really come into play. I mean, Ohio State is losing a kid every day, it feels like, at this point. So it really works on both sides. But I just don't see like the mass exodus in the Big Ten. I don't know who's had the most departures, but it is really encouraging to see such stability at the top of the Big Ten, because you don't see, hey, 10 kids from, Minnesota hit the portal today. Like, we see that at other schools. So I do think that collectively that says a lot of positives about the Big Ten, about the head coaches in place and kind of the structure at the top of the league. But of course, there's always going to be those splashes on the other end of it. But I'm not sure what the answers are to filter out the portal and make it a little bit more reasonable for the kids who jump in it. I think it kind of reverts back to them and self-awareness, just like it does with these coaches and these schools, right? You don't recruit, if you're Sparty, if you're Michigan State, you're not going to recruit all the kids in Miami, because you're probably not going to get most on campus. You have to have that self-awareness as you navigate as well. So I do think the portal has reflected recruiting in general. There is a trickle down effect, to go back to that point. There is an influx of group of 5 talent as they look to bolster their rosters. But the problem is, a lot of these kids who leave a Power 5 school think, I got to stay in the Power 5. So I do think some of that purgatory 43% is kids who are a little bit stubborn or didn't have a plan going into it and that's what goes back to self-awareness as well. So I think the Big Ten has avoided a lot of the stigma around it in volume. And I think that's probably a good thing and a good reflection of the league itself.
Going to be tough to beat Miami if they keep giving out cars in recruiting, but we'll see what ends up happening. Maryland was, as of about a month ago in a quick research, the team that has lost the most amount of Big Ten players as of right now. And maybe that Miami car money conversation is one we can have next week with John at some point. Who knows? But he'll be back on at some point soon for sure. John Garcia Jr., Director of Football Recruiting over at Sports Illustrated, with us here on the show. Matt Sheen of Locked On Spartans on every single week. Thanks again, John, for joining us here on the program.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Look at that.
Yeah.